Good morning. Can you hear me? It's very weird because I don't hear myself, only like the normal tone, but not amplified. So welcome to this session. Before I will ask the speakers or panelists to introduce themselves, I would like to give you a short introduction into what we are going to do. So there was a first instance of that panel, or a first step, how it ended up being, and that was a call for papers for another conference on care, and it was in the context of media studies. And Anna, could you maybe please give the slide? And that call for papers was based on the Care Manifesto, and it took up its critique of the institutional care system in a very Western way, and also very white Western way, and we felt that something had to be done about that, and we proposed this panel in a little bit another context and more concentrated on media studies issues. And as you can see, we are not the only ones approaching the critique from another angle. There's, for example, this Decolonizing Self-Care book that does a deconstruction of the very white and Western form of self-care that is also capitalized and commodified. And it's a very biting critique of this system with its smoothies, yoga and relax retreats. But we are proposing something a little bit different. We propose to another term, another notion, which is the notion of looking after, that goes away from the dichotomy of the caregiver and the caretaker that you have in the very institutionalized systems of care, and goes towards a more informal notion of caring, so looking after, as a sort of being well together. And we want to explore also the power of political resistance that lies in that term of looking after. So that is a little bit to sum up what you can expect from that panel. And now I would like to ask you to present yourselves. Maybe we start with Sophie.
Hi. Oh, I'm taking these off. My name is Sophie McKeown-Koitek. I'm an art historian and media scholar, and I'm currently studying critical studies at Leuphana University, where I'm also working at the Kunst of Leuphana. And I will be talking about Tabitha Roser, who is a French artist with Guyanese and Danish roots, and she's especially well known for her video collages, which kind of combine ancestral symbols of knowledge, CGI animations, GIFs, and just a general internet aesthetics. And I'll be looking at Deep Down Title from 2017. And I came across this work in 2022 when really a lot of lives had shifted quite strongly to the internet. And what I was seeing was that there was, especially on social media, this discourse about self-care, and Deep Down Title really touches upon these two topics. So one, the internet, but not as this independent, neutral cloud, but actually really deeply linked to Earth's materialities and societal structures. And then the topic of self-care, which was kind of being discussed as almost a neoliberal tool for self-optimization, and therefore also implicitly valorizing some bodies, then devaluing other bodies. And Roser really takes it back to self-care as a political act and as an act of resistance and an act of survival within a Black feminist, queer, and anti-capitalist struggle. So that's the direction I'll be going into today.
Thank you. Anna, would you?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, it's a bit awkward to talk and have headphones on, but here we go. So I'm Ana Carvalho, and I live in Porto, Portugal, where I teach and I do research on audiovisual in a broad sense, but I'm interested in technologies related with sound and image. So, but my interest in this topic, it's very personal. Oops. It's very personal. So I'm interested in this idea of looking after very specifically. And that is because as a child living in a Portugal that just recently left dictatorship, we children used to play on the streets because there was no formal structure that would be able to look after or to be able to care for us in that strict sense. So because of that, what I realize now as an adult is that we were in fact looking after each other. We were being sure, we were as children with our parents working, both our parents working in the neighborhood where everyone had to go to work to earn a living. Then it was up to us to be together and go into adventures, sometimes not approved by our parents, but that's another issue altogether. So now I look at it and I see that how important it was for us to be together and to grow up together. And now I am in a different situation, which is I look after my mother. So I'm a carer, an informal carer, and I understand how relevant and how important it is, more than the formal care, which does not fulfill the needs. It's all the informal connections with the formal carers, but also with friends and family and neighbors, and in general with everyone that's one way or the other, either are in similar situations or that are empathic towards the people that look after their elders. So in this history, it's a kind of I've tried to reflect upon it from different perspectives, and also trying to realize that in other situations it's as important or even more important. So that is my or from here departs my interest in looking at being together, looking after each other in queer communities, and especially on the borders where it becomes, in the situations where it becomes a matter of life and death. And so I'm bringing to our conversation, to our discussion, two examples. One from Teresa Villaverde, a director that talks a lot in her films about children looking after each other during the 80s and the 90s in Portugal, and also music and video clips as strategies to bring visibility and to bring awareness to the queer community. And that's it.
Thank you, Anna. Saad, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, why not? So thank you for, I'm happy to be here in this very weird place, but I love it. So yeah, I'm Saan Uttamachot. I'm independent filmmaker and curator based in Berlin. And most of my work in the past have been involved with either queer communities in Berlin, in which I work for Queer Film Festival Berlin. It's called Expose. It's happening next weekend, this coming weekend. So in case if you are curious, in Movimento in Babylon Kreuzberg, we are showing queer movies from around the world. So I'm involved in curation and programming of this festival. And I recently worked on this exhibition in which I'm going to talk about it today, called In Nobody's Service in Gallery Wedding, U-Bahn Leopoldplatz. And it's related to history of sex workers and care workers from Thailand, Philippines, who moved to West Germany in the 80s, in the 90s. And then on my movie that was premiered in Berlinale this year called I Don't Want to Be Just a Memory, which is a dedication to my queer friend who died because of drug overdose in Berlin nightlife. And it's pretty famous cases that in the Berlin druggy party life, we all have heard of this. So we'll go that into a bit of details of what, maybe practically what this history of care could means and what are strategies that we could do in our artistic practice, maybe. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We will start the real conversation with a sort of small introduction by Sophie, who will talk about Deep Down title by Tabitha Rosaire, but also give us a little bit of the theoretical background we are working with. So if you're ready, I would like to invite you to start.
Yes, I'm actually going to start with the clip.
Electronic colonialism is the domination and control of digital technologies by the West to maintain and expand their hegemonic power over the rest of the world. Salvador warned us in 1995 when he wrote, "The West desperately needs new places to conquer. When they do not actually exist, they must be created. Enter cyberspace." Electronic colonialism is one of the many ways in which colonial domination survived after its defeat. While settler colonialism was the policy and practice of acquiring, controlling, occupying, and economically exploiting land and labor, which by the way is still a thing, it's just now called capitalism, electronic colonialism seeks to influence and control the mind through the digital device. It also operates by sustaining the dependency of former colonized countries on the West by the importation of hardware, software, engineers, technicians, and information protocols. This creates a set of foreign norms, values, and expectations that alter and marginalize local cultures, languages, habits, values, and lifestyles in favor of Eurocentric knowledge. Many countries in the global south have become electronic colonies that are force-fed information generated by the Western world. Under the guise of globalization,
Thank you. All right. So I chose this sequence from Deep Down title because it quite briefly explains what Tabitha Rosaire understands to be electronic colonialism. And she's here quoting the cultural critic Ziauddin Zadeh, who already in the 1990s wrote about the internet kind of being this colonial space, so fairly early on within the history of the internet. And what the artist then continues to do is that she ties these power dynamics that were just described to material realities, such as infrastructure. So later on, for example, she talks about how fiber optic cables, which are on the bottom of the ocean and which are responsible for over 90% of our connectivity, actually follow former slave ship routes. And what she also do is that she connects these power dynamics to hierarchy of knowledge systems, where the quote-unquote West controls subjectivity, philosophy, and science, as well as a general production of knowledge. And the sociologist Anibal Quijano has really done a deeper analysis of how a European paradigm of knowledge has been central for a European colonial rule and colonization. And Rosaire sees this colonial project as still being the basis for Western ideology today, which manifests in institutional hierarchies, social relations, territories, and just a general knowledge. And Deep Down title can be seen as a rebellion against this colonial continuity and as breaking with this colonial past through also offering a space for healing and alternative narratives. And for Rosaire, decoloniality is the theory and practice of decoupling from a Western hegemony and a US Eurocentric system of rule. And this means challenging, right, the political, the economic, the cultural, the epistemic dominance of the West. So it includes thinking and also radical action, but that also includes recovery from these Western ideologies. And coloniality is an effective force through all areas of life. So this includes thinking, this includes feeling, this includes moving, speaking, dreaming, desiring, learning, and also loving. And she describes these effects of colonialism as wounds of a sort. So what is needed is not only disobedience and confrontation with these institutionalized systems of violence, but also a healing from these structures on the level of the spirit, the body, and the soul. And this is not just an individualistic approach, right? So central to this healing process is the act of unlearning. And she describes this as letting go, and it is necessary to prevent internalized harmful mechanisms and internalized automated patterns from constantly being reproduced. So healing takes place not only on the emotional, so a more individualistic, but also on the historical level, which then would be a more collective dimension. And Rosaire sees the rewriting of history that comes with unlearning, and which Deep Down Title, which we just looked at, can ultimately be seen as an example of, as a path to healing that holds a lasting potential for the future. And for combating the institutionalized violence and for the epistemic detachment from narratives of dominance, responsibility and resilience are of the utmost necessity. And here I would like to quote Rosaire directly, and this is from her essay, Decolonial Healing, in Defense of Spiritual Technologies, 2022. Quote, "As we engage in the struggle for epistemic delinking, we remember that our responsibility, as in responsibility, our ability to respond to a situation, is the seed of our liberation." End of quote. So decoloniality, as the delinking from Western hegemony and exploitation, is therefore also central for self-care. And this connection between unlearning and self-care continues critical thoughts from Black activists, theorists, and poets, such as Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde. And these authors, right, already in the 1990s and 1980s, established the connection between self-care of marginalized and specifically Black people, also with a focus on women, as a strategy and an important basis for resistance and activism, and especially, right, specifically in the fight against racism. And Bell Hooks describes that a healing process begins when the causes of certain pains are examined. And above all, this means being able to understand how structures such as racism, but she also talks about sexism and heteronormativity, and of course the intersections, restrict one's own self-determination. And strategies of resistance can only be developed if the origins of problems are understood. So paying attention to one's own well-being can be a political act in itself, as well as paving the way for political liberation struggles. And here I think it's also really important to quote Hooks directly, and this is from Sisters of the Yam, Black Women and Self-Recovery from 1994. Quote, "Living as we do in a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal context that can best exploit us when we lack a firm grounding in self and identity, knowledge of who we are and where we have come from, choosing wellness is an act of political resistance. Before many of us can effectively sustain engagement in organized resistance struggle and Black liberation movement, we need to undergo a process of self-recovery that can heal individual wounds that may prevent us from functioning fully." End of quote. So Hooks sees the pursuit of uncovering one's own history as essential to the well-being of Black people within a society designed to harm them. Since wounds are a hindrance to the revolutionary movement, Hook's calls for a confrontation with both collective and individual suffering as a substantial part of a recovery and healing process that is sustainable across generations. So there's a really heavy alignment here with what I said about Rezer before. And I would like to end with a quote by Audre Lorde, who explicitly framed self-care as a political practice in her saying, and this is from A Burst of Light and Other Essays from 1988, quote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgent, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare," end of quote.
Thank you very much. That is a nice end of your introduction with warfare. We're not going to do kind of real warfare here, but trying to find ways how to integrate these tactics also into society and to give them back their political meaning that has been taken up by capitalist society to just commodify the very political and very resistive notion of care and self-care, caring for others and looking after. And we are trying to find out, as Sant already said, how we can do that with our means, that is with discourse and about artworks and films and artworks and films themselves. So that is where Anna and Sant come in, and they decided to ping pong a little bit in their not really presentations, but have an exchange. And I wonder who of you would like to start? Maybe you, Sant?
I mean, if you say so, sure. I mean, that it kind of continue in the slide, I guess. So here I gonna talk about two projects of mine because I have done maybe too much. Gemini, by the way, so she did a lot. But these two projects that I can really specify on. So this is project called In Nobody Service, happening in Gallery Wedding, that I just told you. It's a research on, again, as I said, Thai sex worker and Filipino sex workers and women migration in general from the region to Germany. And actually relating to what you said about like, if you want to do resistance, you need to understand the origin, right? It happens in the Germany since the 70s, this women catalog, Frauen catalog, that you have women from around the world in a book, and you, a white guy, choose a partner. And that was a cliche that a lot of our parent generation faced. And I went there to find out the origin of it. So I went to interview these women who have been, quote unquote, trafficked to Germany, voluntarily or not, right? There was a lot of cases of this violence because, look up the history, it's a bit too complicated to explain. But then it really started also from this history of kind of intersectional history making as well, because you have the problem with feminism that you have this sort of, the feminism of like, save the women, save the brown people, save the sex workers. They are being exploited. This is horrible for them. And you have the feminism from up a bottom, which means that, I'm gonna let myself be exploited, but I want a passport. There's a saying in my research that if I don't give a blowjob, I don't get a passport. And that's true. Swallow it. And that's reality, And so in this project, which ended up as an exhibition and program, we came to understood that what we call care can also have this violence with it. Like the white women care for brown women, they want to save her. It's an absolutely violent thing to do. So it's about like letting them decide for what they want to do. So this picture is Ban Ying. It's an organization that was found in '89 to let's say maybe help or maybe consult to these migrant women. Most of them are illegal to how to stay in Germany, and they found various ways to work with this issue. I'm just gonna pass through. This is some film that I restored, some exhibition that we showed. And then, I asked the artists in this exhibition to write down with the lipstick the cliche that they face in their life. So this is one of it, like are we soft skin? Maybe. I mean, my skin is soft also, I guess. And there's some sculpture from Jasmine Werner and Busarapon Thongchai. I'm not going to go into details. And the other project that I want to thematize to you is also basically my film, which was premiered in Berlinale. And I was just going to play, it's just 30 minutes, 20 seconds of this.
But I wrote it down because I was like, what if I forget all these things?
And basically this film is related to the idea of a lot of cases happened in a party scene in Berlin that people died because of drug overdose, but I guess it's more of this kind of mental health problem. And also going back to the topic of care, because in a party scene, you have this funny saying that sharing drugs is caring, you know, and it's kind of our catch goal, but we kind of almost internalize it and think that having fun together is a way of care, which is also a wrong thing to think. You have to say, this is a very, let's call hyper-individualist approach to community, to the LGBT community. And the real sense of care is actually to have a structure of you know, you have weekend when you have take drugs, party, whatever, and you have weekdays in which you can spend time sober, you can have food, and in this case, to grieve, to memory your dead friends together. And that was the project that we create. And we also established awareness in the film in which you look out for each other. So it's a paid position to look out for each other during the filming process. And I'm not going to go too much, but this is just sort of example maybe that I would just lay out before I would let go to you, and then we can try to do some raps in between. Yeah, thank you.
So perhaps I'm going to jump a few slides ahead because your presentation just reminded me that I have a similar, we'll get back to this if we have the opportunity, but I would like to call your attention for this film. This is an animation film about Gisberta. And Gisberta is also a very well-known name for, not for a good reason, but still to us in Portugal, but in Porto in particular, this name reminds me and is continuously being reminded through art projects. So this is an animation, and in this animation, the director, he went to, well, to start with, let's put this into context. So Gisberta was a trans woman, homeless, and prostitute, and she was living on the streets. In fact, she was living in a specific building that was just left half, you know, just the structure, but the construction was not concluded. And it wasn't concluded, it's still not yet concluded. This was in 2006. And so there was a group of young adults, children and young adults, that used to play on that neighborhood and used to go to this building as well. So at some point they became friends with Gisberta, and then they decided that they were not friends any longer and attacked her and left her during a few days in a situation between life and death. Eventually she ended up dying from mistreatments and sex abuse. So Gisberta is in our minds and will be always in our minds through the artworks. This work in particular, this animation, the director goes back to where are the friends of Gisberta, where are the abusers, and it's going to interview these people. And it's going to bring a new light, which is a sort of an update to the story. And then we have Hilda de Paulo, who is also it's a Brazilian trans woman who lives in Portugal. And she decided to even take this further, which is to tattoo Gisberta on her front face, on her face. So, but I could bring quite a few examples of how the arts, in fact, come to bring awareness, visibility, and become a field where we can talk about these issues. And these are very much related as well to what was before this idea of childhood that needs to be together. Otherwise, they would run into trouble, or at least they run into trouble together. It's less bad, or perhaps it's even worse. But anyway, that's how things used to work. So these kids, they are just a group of people that, group of young children playing alone on the streets. So this was, maybe I could continue with the next example. So I like especially this video clip. I'm going to show you a bit. The clip is here somewhere. Yeah. Or hold on, it's here. Full screen, I'm sorry. Without my glasses, I'm just useless. Thank you. Yeah.
Eu acordei agora, dormi.
Hold on, I'm going to show you just 3 parts, which I think are really important rather than the whole film. This is Mulher, by Linda Quebrada. But there's, hold on, maybe, starting here. Not yet there, more here.
Nas ruas pela surdina é onde faz o seu salário. Aluga o corpo a pobre rico, endividado milionário. Não tem Deus, nem pátria amada, nem marido, nem patrão. Medo a que não faz parte do seu vocabulário. Ela é tão singular, só se contenta com plurais. Ela não quer pau, ela quer paz. Seu segredo ignorado por todos e até pelo espelho. Seu segredo ignorado por todos e até pelo espelho.
I'm going to stop here just for a moment to call your attention to the two parallel narratives. So one of them, you have this woman with a man in a car, and obviously this takes us to a context of a prostitute. And then we have several scenes of different women, and they will start coming together in this other parallel narrative. They will start coming together as a group. So the narrative builds up.
As travestis que lutam para existir e a cada dia conquistar o seu direito de viver e brilhar. Batam palmas para as travestis que lutam para existir e a cada dia batalhando conquistar o seu direito de viver e brilhar, arrasar. Viver e brilhar, arrasar. Viver e brilhar, arrasar. Viver e brilhar, arrasar. É amapô de carne e osso, silicone industrial, navalha na boca, calcinha de fio dental. Ela é amapô de carne e osso, silicone industrial, navalha na boca, calcinha de fio dental. Ela é amapô de carne e osso, silicone industrial, navalha, navalha, valha, navalha, navalha, valha, navalha, navalha, valha, navalha, navalha.
Okay, so these groups come together. You have a whole variety of women. So this concept of womanhood, it's very different from the polarity of man, woman that we are used to. So it's there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of bodies, a lot of ways of being a woman. And they come together as a group to protect this woman that we see since the beginning in the other narrative. But a third part, which I think ends quite nicely, is this kind of protection.
Homem que consome, só come, some. Homem que consome, só come, fudeu e some. Eu tô correndo de
So this is what I think it's very interesting, and ends a really bad story with a very positive perspective, this kind of coming together and looking after each other. So this is my favorite example of, especially because you can dance and just move.
I mean, that's also what community is, no? Like,
Absolutely.
I think like also what people usually misunderstood community is like, I don't know, LGBTQ women, like quote unquote women coming together just because it's about women. But I think community comes from a common struggle or a more like a common problem that they face, regardless of their identities, even in a certain way, right? So.
Yeah, and I think in the case of Linda Quebrada, I don't know if you know her. She's been present in Berlin quite some time with also a very beautiful documentary film about her, Bisha Travesti, and shows. And she also does real political work. So she combines the struggle, the political struggle, with her artwork. And we didn't have subtitles, but the texts are also very, very explicitly poetic and political at the same time. And she really brings that all together, this struggle, this common struggle, and then this very beautiful caring for each other, looking after each other.
Yeah?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so yes, where we go from here? Where do we go from these examples, from your work, raising awareness, but going where with it, or reaching out to whom? Sometimes I think about this. It's good, for example, Linda Quebrada. It's good because she's quite a star. But and so she reaches out to a lot of people, which is really good.
She was even in the Brazilian version of Big Brother, so she reaches out to really a lot of people. And how would you define that in your work, San? Is it more for the community, or do you try to have also this educational side, which is maybe a bad word for it, but trying to tell the story to people outside of the community? What was your experience with the exhibition in Wedding? Because I went to a performance that was part of that exhibition, and I had the feeling that it reached like not a huge crowd, because it's still kind of a sort of off space, even if it's run by the city, but it touched more than just the community, if you will.
I mean, I guess for the exhibition, but also for the film, like we try to thematize some practical maybe ways to deal with things, right? So the performance you went is by Montisu Satawaha, and it's kind of inspired by practice of Banying, these women that I show you the picture. There was organization found in '89, and they did this thing called German food workshop in the 90s. So why do you need to learn about making schnitzel? is because your white husband usually don't allow you to leave the house. So in the 90s, like these white racists are fucking racist. And so when the women, the migrant women want to be independent, they will not be allowed, right? Because they are relied on the husband passport. So there's a lot of control. There's a lot of domestic abuse that control these women in the house. So the only way to allow these women to leave the house is to learn about German food, because it comes from the idea that they cannot make German food. And the organization will host that, okay, we are here to make German food, but we're actually here to talk about divorce rights, your rights to stay, abortion rights, and so on. And these are really intersectional approach to maybe creating community. Is not directly like, oh, women come to learn about your rights, come learn about German food. It's a way to hide how to create a space, right? And also for my film that we're trying to remind people that that does people take party for granted, so usually just go and get crazy during the Berlin weekend, and then you forget what it means to have a community. It's already existing. Berlin is famous, almost touristic for this kind of techno party, so we have to actually reclaim it for the LGBTs and for people with depression and suicidal thoughts. You can reclaim that space, but you need to find your practice in that space somehow. Yeah.
So maybe in that case, I'll take it back, for example, to how. So we didn't find a strategy as children the same way, of course, because we're still. I think that in the case of children in the 80s and the 90s, at least in Portugal, which is a very specific context, we were kind of between the power of the church and the power of the church over the family and the media. So they would be censoring everything that was outside the norm, and then the video clips and all the flamboyant looks of the 80s, but especially during the 90s. So, of course, we were, as teenagers, we all wanted to look like, the pop stars that we see on the video clips, but that was just to see, not to get close to, not to look like, which is a bit awkward in a way, because that's what teenagers want to do, is to look like the stars. Anyway, so there was no way around due to the way society still educated in dictatorship would, to think or to structure their thoughts. And in that case, there wasn't simple strategies other than neighbors, looking after neighbors. And that was it. It was something really informal. Perhaps you take a look at my children if you arrive earlier at home, or if I can't reach out to get which happened quite a lot with my brother. So if I can't be there as quick enough, I call my neighbor to take the kid to the hospital because he broke his head riding the bicycle or his ankle or something. So that happened quite a lot. And it was good to be together because that way we could call an adult wherever the adult was, sometimes really, really far, or through the phone. So without these strategies, because there was no structure, and I think that this is also being a child shouldn't be part of this invisible side, but it was perhaps there's nothing to do about side of the society of the time. So there was no structure to look, that would provide the care, and in that case the formal care for children after class.
Okay, I want to jump in also quickly for this, what you raised about neighborhood and the child, because it's very physical also. It's a very also geographical structure of care because you are there physically, let's say. Also relating much to my film because I forgot important part called COVID. In the party scene, usually come together physically together, right? And then your friend died. And during the COVID time, you cannot meet. So one of the thema of the grief of what lacks also ending in our contemporary society is that we lack physical space to grieve. Especially during COVID time, you cannot meet. So your friend just died yesterday and you cannot meet your like other friends today. So that was also the biggest question that forced society to think what can be a structure of care during COVID time, which maybe meant some digital form, I don't know. And later on now the physical world comes back and we are now also wondering what is this, structure that we can make. And it is a really good point that when we were young, we didn't have to rethink what are new structures of care because it was more or less quote unquote the tradition, right? But now we have to rethink all of this and what it means.
Yes, absolutely. Also, I think that COVID digitally and non-digitally changed a lot. We came out of that period quite different and maybe now have different needs also of care because something happened to all of us. But we don't want to talk alone and between us, but we would like to open. If you have questions or comments, you're very welcome to ask. There is a microphone, but there's also someone with a microphone going around if you not feeling comfortable to stand up to that very official microphone. So please enter the conversation and start the exchange with us. Otherwise, we will just go on talking. Is there? Yes. Here.
Try this one. Does it work? Okay. I know what you're saying. I hear my own voice. Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking a lot about this. We're talking about growing up and children like caring for themselves. And what I wanted to ask is, it is obviously too much of a burden to ask children to care for themselves. And if you had I reckon you were growing up in these circumstances. Is this your story? And is there also some sort of empowerment in children caring for themselves? So is there also an element of, you felt abandoned by your society a bit? Not at all. Okay. Yeah. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So, of course, my perspective on that part of part of my generation in Portugal. It's not me, it's a whole generation. It's very different today than was when I was 10, 11, 12. It was so fun. We didn't have any supervision, so we just had to, it was just play. And was play, riding the bicycle and going, now that I think about it, it was like, oh God, what have I done? But at the time it was really cool. And yeah, there was some really bad moments, but anyway, in general, we were free. So there was no one to be telling us what to do. But if I'm not a bad example, there are a lot of bad examples. There are, for example, it's not only Gisberta. Gisberta is a bad example of kids hanging around on their own. But there's more bad examples. We had a group of skinheads killing a black man one night in the 90s. I don't recall the date, but this is a story. And it's also, different ages. Some were older, some were very young. But still, you hang out with your friends and you get into trouble. So not everything goes that well. That said, yeah, I think it's important. I feel that it's important to give some responsibility it doesn't have to be forced, that responsibility of being together and looking after. I was not forced to anything, but it just happened. And to impose that on a child is probably too much, I reckon. But if that happens, then if you leave it, it's rather interesting and very important for, for feeling that you belong, and that you, in that case, you sense that you really, that you're part of a group.
Okay, weird. I'd just like to add that, so you grew up this way, but I feel like nowadays with social medias, children still care for themselves and still look out for each other, but through a different space. Like, it's not a physical or geographical space like we said, but more digital one. And I think that they seek this liberty. Like, it's not something they are forced to do, and there's still this lack of supervision from the parents, and I think it's very similar, and I would love to hear your opinion about this similitudes with how you grew up and how the children grew up nowadays.
I can hear you, I can hear what you say. I don't have children, so I like the information firsthand. But the feeling that I have is that there are, yes, some similarities, and you have to be careful in the same way, or in a similar way now that you had to be careful then. I mean, there's always bad grown-ups, there's always people that will try to trick you. You make friends. Something I've learned I was very surprised some years ago. I asked my students about friendship online, and I was very surprised. You have to consider that I'm 53, okay? So to my surprise, some of my students, so all of them, they had friends online. Okay, so this was generic. Everyone has friends online. Some of them had friends that they met, or they used to meet every once in a while, but would continue to talk online. It was very seldom that they would meet. But there was some students that had a best friend that they never saw in all their lives in presence, in the physical space, because it was some sort of a virtual friend, or their communications has been always online. Some of these best friends, they were in another continent. So yes, it's very similar, and yeah, you do have to meet people in structures without supervision, and it has good results as well. So yeah.
There's another question.
I have also a question that connects to that area in general, the physical space, the virtual space, and perhaps more on a broader scale, not thinking about children and supervision, but in general, how are we connected, and how does it change for us if we're connected to people where the real common denominator is that we live in one area, that we are neighbors, that we live in the same neighborhood? Or if the common denominator in the internet, it's usually something else. We like the same music, we have the same interests, we are from a similar demographic, whatever. And how does care change in relation to what is the common denominator? Is it this physical space that just is kind of like, by chance? We have really nothing in common except that we live close to each other, that we go to the same school, we have the same workplace, we meet in person? Or is it something that we choose, like or is it something that we don't choose, but it's also, we find those people somewhere else in the world who have the same problems, the same cares, same issues they have to deal with every day. And how can we set up structures that work for both? Because I think we have to care and we have to take care of each other in those physical spaces. And we have to take care of people who are a bit like us, or also who we face the same problems, who we find interesting, who perhaps are not like us, but think like us, have some ideas that we also want to promote, stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's not really a question, but that's what's going on in my mind at the moment.
It's actually a great question, and maybe the two ones that are a bit closer to being digital natives than Anna and me would like to say something about it. Any ideas?
I think it's really hard to separate both. I don't think that there's this clear separation between digital and non-digital. And I think that's really strongly connected. And also I think, especially spending most of my adult life in Berlin, I think that a lot of community building has actually, for me personally, and I think that's very common for also big cities, not been so much classic neighborhood built where it's like we have this big neighborhood community, but it is already very strongly about, all right, I'm going to go to spaces where I know that like-minded people will be. And that also implies a certain type of safety. And I think it's similar with the digital sphere, that there is, and I think that was quite present in actually Rezea's work too, right? There's always this duality to it, that it can be this really cruel, dangerous space, but that it's always been used for community building, also for political organization to actually change realities in the physical world.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that 3 minutes. There was a joke that some of my, let's say, quote unquote, older colleagues always say that, oh, social media is so fake, and like, I don't know, things are superficial there. I'm like, no, babes, it's our reality, and either you don't accept it or not, you know. And a lot of potential and strategies are developed in social media. I mean, let's not start, I don't know, Me Too, social justice, and so on, and it's an important part of it somehow. And also in our project, like to memorize someone, to keep memories of someone so also quote unquote unimportant alive. Like a lot of my friends who die are not like politicians, they are like drug user junkies, but they need to be kept alive, you know. And normal physical institution space don't remember them. So only Facebook and social media do. And that's reality, you know. There's a lot of power there somehow.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because if you come from our generation, you're very much into that leftist critique of social media, and of course that is true, and one has to be kind of critical and careful and know who's behind those social media, who's behind TikTok and whatever else we have. But then there is the other side to it, and even for me, I'm not on social media, but I'm very much living in and with the internet. And I think in post-digital times, you can't really make that difference anymore. It becomes blurred. It has always been blurred. And it's already blurred with the hardware and the software. So you never could really make that difference. And I think we have to keep that in mind, that yes, we have those neighbors and we have those kind of students they put us together with at school, and we don't necessarily like them, but then we have the possibility to kind of build other communities online and then also eventually maybe meet those people. I think we don't have enough time left for another question, because I don't want to rush anyone and don't want to rush any. Yeah, we have 1 minute. That is not enough. So I would like to take the time to thank everyone who has been helping us here, and like to thank you for being with me on that panel. It was a lot of fun. Also the preparations. We had a good talk yesterday already, and we had talks online to prepare the panel. And I would like to thank you for being here and sharing that panel with us under sometimes a little bit difficult audio conditions with a lot of uncaring sound from the outside. So thank you very much also for the very beautiful questions you've been asking. Thank you.